Good morning, everyone. This is Elizabeth Whelan. I'm an artist here on Chappaquiddick Island, and welcome to my studio. And I wanted to have a little fireside chat with you today. And I actually do have a fire over here going on in the pellet stove. It's winter, as you can tell from my garb, and it's nice and chilly, and I'm expecting snow. So that's a really good day as far as I'm concerned. But I'm just about to start a class in a half hour or so, and I've been thinking a lot about the whole business of learning art, learning new techniques, learning drawing and that sort of thing, and about the fear and anxiety that comes with that. So, we're all excited. We think we're going to learn this new thing. We're going to attend a class. What we're not really prepared for is all the negative stuff that comes along with that. The anxiety, the performance anxiety, basically, of not only just are you going to have someone else looking at your work, but even on Zoom, your own criticism of yourself. So most people who are watching this video are adults learning at some point in their lives. And adult learning is so different from kids. Kids, you just give them a crayon and a piece of paper and they go to it. There's no problem. But years ago, I used to be an instructor for teaching swimming. And one of the most difficult classes I had was the adult swim because adults understood that pressure of the water against your chest. They understood about drowning and all the things that could go wrong. And so the amount of trepidation and anxiety and the need to prepare mentally and understand what was happening was vastly higher than the 4-year-old who just ran to the side of the pool and jumped in, not even understanding whether they could float or not or anything of the sort. So I was experiencing some of these same problems. I mean, I can draw pretty well and paint and this, that, and the other, but I've been trying to teach myself watercolor. And for anyone who has done both oil painting and watercolor, you know that the way of thinking about how you lay down the paint is exactly the opposite. In oil painting, we often start with the darks and go to the lights. In watercolor, absolutely the opposite. So, chances of Elizabeth getting herself tied up into knots really quickly, 100%. So I know I've been trying to be really kind of methodical about how I go about it. But still, even though I am progressing and, I've been reading some good books and doing some exercises and this, that, and the other, I sat down the other day to try to pull off a technique I had seen a really well-known watercolor artist do. And could I do it? No. Not only that, but what was interesting to me, and the whole reason behind this fireside chat today, is that I experienced a really high degree of anxiety, of stress, of trying to work. I was in the middle of a jungle and I couldn't figure out my way out, and I couldn't figure out where I had gone wrong. And the more I'm hacking with my machete, at the vines and the trees and such, the worse things are getting. Finally, I did what so many artists do. I stopped and I ripped it up into little pieces, and I said, I'm going to try this again another day. But being a professional artist, I knew that, it can't just end there. That's a sorry way to approach any kind of art. And what I needed to do was break it down and figure out where exactly did it go wrong. At some point in the process, I was still feeling good. I was, mixing paints and I'd done my sketch and, the beginning bit, I felt good about. I let it dry. I came back to it. And then something went wrong. So for me, I actually figured out that I was so excited about the watercolor process that I wasn't letting it dry. The effect I wanted to get required the layers to dry before I got to the next part. I wasn't letting that happen, and so it just became a big soupy mess. So what does that have to do with drawing? Well, I think that for many beginning drawing, there is a method to drawing. On one hand, yeah, sure, all of us, from the time we were small, something in our hands we can draw. But if you're really trying to achieve a drawing that you love or that you feel accomplished something, there's got to be a little bit of thought to it. Now, even if that's a 20-minute drawing in a cafe of people walking by, you still have a plan. You still have an idea of what you want. So if you're not doing a 20-minute sketch and you have a little bit of time to think about what you're up to, you know how much I love this no-tan process of doing a little black and white sketch, two-color sketch, that just shows where the dark and light of your design is going to be. So I'm just going to angle the camera up a little. You can see this bean painting that I've got going on up here. It's pole beans hanging, you can see a sort of a dark and light pattern there. You can see definite lights, definite darks. So before I started that, I did this little black and white sketch, knowing that if I got off track later on down the line, I could tighten the drawing back up by reestablishing those dark and light patterns that I was looking for. So the next step, if you have a little time when you're drawing, is to do a really rough version of what your whole plan is. So you've got your no-tan, the little black and white study. Then you've got maybe a little rough sketch that goes, okay, this is the idea. I'm going to do maybe some angled strokes over here. I'm going to let it fade away over there. I'm going to make sure that I emphasize that pattern of shadows that I saw running through the thing. And this drawing is all about the church steeple or whatever it happens to be. And maybe you used your viewfinder to actually establish that that was the really good design early on when you were doing the no-tan. So there are those prep stages, and then you get started on the actual drawing you want to do. Now, all of that initial stuff could have just taken, a couple of minutes, or it could take a half an hour, depending on, what you're up to and the amount of time you want to spend on something. But it's important to look when things go wrong in your eventual drawing, to look back at those early stages and go, did those go well? Was I happy with that? Because if you were, you want to celebrate that. And I know that's a phrase that's a little bit overused now, but what I mean is the things that we did get right, we have to acknowledge that to ourselves, especially as adults. There isn't somebody there patting us on the back and going, oh, well done, Elizabeth, gold star for you. You did a really nice no-tan. So if I don't go, hey, that looks pretty good, to myself, who else is going to say that, right? So I want you, as you're working on stuff and something goes right, to say out loud, if you can, if you're not going to feel like an idiot, or to yourself, hey, that part is looking good. Let me get on to the next bit. So the other part of that is if it isn't looking good, do it again. Just do it again. Even if it means that you don't have time to do the whole sketch. If you're stuck on the no-tan thing and the no-tan isn't looking good, do 3 or 4 of them till you get the hang of it. If your little rough sketch isn't really capturing what you're after in the scene, let me tell you, the big one isn't going to look any better either. So, take the time to go, why? Why is that not? Like, what is that? What is not happening here? You know, even in the very, very rough sketch, are my proportions not right? Is there something about what I'm seeing compelled me? Something about this sketch isn't right. And likewise, as you go through the final piece, the same kind of assessment. If it all goes off the rails, and it will frequently, then you stop and you go, okay, can I save this, but can I backtrack a little bit, maybe erase some things or whatever? Or have I really kind of just made a big old mess of it? And if you're working with charcoal, this is really easy to do, really easy because it doesn't erase as well as graphite. And go, okay, I need to just step back. So for me with the watercolor, one of the things that not only did I realize about the drawing, about the drawing aspect, I also realized I was taking on too much too soon, that I really needed to go back to something more simple and make sure I had that down and then enlarge and try some of these other more elaborate techniques. Otherwise, it's like trying to be Rembrandt, when you've only just learned how to mix oil paint. It's just asking a little too much of yourself. So one of the things, you see me here wearing this sweater. Okay, this is a bit of a tangent, but you'll see where I'm going. And I love these sweaters. These are sweaters from Iceland. And, I've just always really liked them. But when I was younger, I felt much more need to conform to fashion. And at the time, these sweaters were not fashionable. You'd go to a foreign country, like you'd go to Iceland or you'd go to Peru and you'd get a Peruvian shawl. I didn't go to Peru, but I've seen people do this. And you're excited about it because you really love it. And you bring it home and nobody else is wearing anything like that. So you don't wear it either. It just sits in your closet and then it ends up on eBay. And then I buy it because that's how I got this sweater. But the reason, but as you can see now, I am wearing this sweater. In fact, I have a whole bunch of them and I wear them frequently because I just decided at some point in my life, and I think for women that tends to be maybe when you hit 40 or you hit 50 and you go, you know what? I just don't really care what anybody else thinks about my Icelandic sweater. I'm wearing it anyway. And that certainly happened for me. But when you think about your artwork, you want to have that same kind of attitude. Everything you do is not good, all right? Just like everything I wear is not going to be fashionable, or is not going to be maybe color coordinated or whatever. But you want to approach your artwork in a very personal manner and go, okay, to me, this looks good. To me, this step looked good. To me, this step didn't look good. Why not? I need to try something else. So I'm going to reference my bean painting again. Whoops, over there. I've been painting for 12 years now, and I'm really happy with the way I paint. But I do keep trying new things because I want to assess, is there something new I can bring in? And there was a particular something I was looking for when it came to botanical paintings in particular. I didn't want to get like super photographic. I wanted to, sort of start bending off in my own direction, but still have the thing look like the thing. And so this bean painting was one of my first attempts to do that. And I'm really happy with the way it's coming along. It's not finished yet. I've got the bottom part to do. But the design of it and the myriad colors I was able to pull in and all the other stuff, I was like, okay, that's really great. I don't care if this painting ever sells. I don't care what happens to it. Well, I would like it to sell, but you know what I mean. But it accomplished something that I can then take onto the next piece I do and try it on something that's a more complex subject, like portraiture. Now, what I didn't do is I didn't dive into portraiture and suddenly start, drawing people or painting people in a different way. I know from my own way of going about things that this is a better way for me to practice on the things I'm trying on vegetables or whatever. So it might be the same with you. You might actually want to do portraiture in drawing. That might be your goal. But sometimes it is, and maybe you've gotten to a certain point where you are pretty good with that, but you really kind of feel like your own style isn't coming out yet. Well, practice those other things, those other styles, those other things you want to do, whether it's tighter, looser, whatever it happens to be, on a subject matter that you feel is more approachable, that it won't matter, whether it's a coffee cup or, a building or something else that you feel doesn't matter as much as that thing that you want to. And it'll give you courage. So this is what we're after, that fear and anxiety that overwhelms us when we're trying to do something new. It can stop you in your tracks. It can make you not want to go any further. What you have to do is like everything else in your adult life that's a problem, you have to break it down and go, okay, what's going right? What's going wrong? How the next time when I reapproach this, can I get to another step? So that often means for artists doing it over again, looking at it again, but trying to do it in a way where you're just not repeating your mistake, where you're actually trying to make some sort of improvement. So, this whole business of, I got some notes here, that's why I'm flipping things over here, of telling yourself when you do well and acknowledging that, because who the heck else is going to do that for you? You've got to do it for yourself. You look for your wins, you break it down, and you figure out what the problem is. And if it's a technique problem, then sure, you need to study that technique. If you can't get your values right because your pencil strokes are too far apart, if you need to work on a value scale because you're always going too dark or too light or you just can't seem to control it. That's all stuff you can practice. There are tons of books, tons of videos, all of that stuff out there. As a quick note, that's one of the things that we're going to be working on in the upcoming series of classes, Another Summer of Drawing, where we are going to be talking more about technique. But technique isn't like a magic wand that you wave on everything. Technique is useful. Composition is useful. Technique is useful. What's most important is your own courage to move forward. There is a picture I'm going to show at the end of this. I just saw it on the internet the other day. It blew my mind. It's a photograph of Picasso painting a model. Now, I've seen the final painting. I had no idea that it came from this model. But you'll see that, the years and years and years of doing it his own way, of practicing, of trying different techniques, different styles of drawing and painting and this, that, and the other, culminated in him being able to process in his mind this thing that he was after based on what he was seeing. And that is how your personal style develops. But it develops from doing. It doesn't develop from looking at Picasso or even listening to what I'm talking about. You actually have to do this stuff. So when people talk about being intentional, this is another one of those buzzwords that kind of drives me crazy, kind of like mark making. Unfortunately, they're really descriptive, so I tend to use them as well. Every time I do, I cringe. If you have a better word for mark making, email me at erwhelan@gmail.com because I'd love to hear it and be able to use it. But intentional, when people talk about being intentional, sometimes artists, and particularly beginning artists, interpret that as meaning, oh, I have to be very confident. And as long as I'm confident and intentional, then the stroke just goes where it's supposed to. And this is setting yourself up for disaster and disappointment because it's not going to go where you want it to. I mean, there's no way that that's going to happen like that. Because what intentional really means is with thought, with some idea based on experience, going, all right, I happen to know, because I did this before, that if I shade in this area and let it bleed into this area over here, intentionally, then I'm going to create a look that I know is going to look really cool, and it will make that figure look like he's melding or into the background or whatever it happens to be. That's what intentional is. It also means that when you are doing the quick 20-minute sketch, which often is all we have time for, that you've done enough of it that okay, if I put down carefully these initial lines like this and get that perspective going right, now I can sort of sketch in the rest of it and the whole thing's going to come off looking really good. I know that if I leave this area over here blank, that'll be a really neat effect because I'll have some contrast. So that's what being intentional is. So don't beat yourself up if you're trying to be confident and make those marks and do this, that, and the other, and you know what? It just didn't turn into something that's going to hang into the Louvre because you're not alone. Confidence is great. It's what we want, but we want to base it on experience. Experience happens by doing, by actually drawing over and over again and trying to learn from what we're up to. And so that's where we get the courage from, right? That's the wellspring of courage is experience. So if you're just starting on this path of drawing or painting or whatever, just take a big breath and do it again. But don't just do it thoughtlessly. Look back at what worked and what didn't and assess your work at every stage compared to what it is you're trying to paint or draw, whether it's from a photograph or real life or whatever it happens to be, your imagination, and say to yourself, is this going in the direction I want it to? Or even, is the direction that it's going good? Maybe not what I intended, but I like it anyway and I'm going to keep going. Or, am I veering off track? Does it need to go back to something else? So I have found through my own art career, and I'm a professional artist, I get commissions and, sell work, that I have started to figure out when those moments are where things might be problematic. And I have learned to step back and maybe even stop the painting at that moment, let it sit, come back to it another day and go, oh, and look at it with fresh eyes and go, okay, let's be careful here about how we move forward. Doesn't mean I can't still be loose and paint and this, that, and the other, but I'm doing it based on intention. I'm doing it based on thoughtfulness. So just to conclude, if you're starting off on this journey and you are just at the point, you're an adult, you're starting to draw again, you're enjoying yourself, but it all is overwhelming you. And in fact, when you sit in on, say, like a class like mine, which is an hour long, we're doing 2 or 3 sketches, you're only getting a few minutes, you've never done this before. It's intense. The pressure is intense. And I know it because I'm sitting in on replays of these classes right now, and I'm doing it, and I feel like, oh my gosh, quickly get this down. Da, da, da. Just do what you can. If what you can means, drawing little pictures of what I'm doing and taking notes, and then on your own time going back and doing it again when you have a little bit more time to think. If it means doing that drawing over 3 or 4 days, if it means doing it 3 or 4 times. The idea is that you're taking those thoughts into your head, the ideas you're hearing, and you're letting that become part of the voices that are inside your head when you're drawing. Because the voice you don't want it inside your head is the little guy sitting on your shoulder going, that looks like crap. You know, you can't draw that. Whoever thought you could draw? Because that's the stuff that happens, right? He starts up, chatter, 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 the minute you put the pen to the paper. So just, flick him off your shoulder. And that was advice given to me by a fellow who was teaching me how to paint. To play piano. Will Lucky. He told me that even he, as a professional musician, had that little guy sitting up there chattering away, and just flick him off. And so I'm telling you the same thing. When you start feeling that, the little voices, the anxiety, just relax, look back. Yeah, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? If you are, give yourself a pat on the back. If you're not, maybe, backtrack a little bit, try it again, see what happened. I know you can do this. I know you have the ability to draw and paint the way you would like to. It's not easy. It's a lifelong adventure. We never get there. That's part of the fun of it. I mean, if we could just do it like that, well, what fun would it be, right? So have some courage, have some fun, happy drawing, happy painting. Thank you so much for being with me here for my fireside chat. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.